The wind cut through the plains like a blade, sharp and unrelenting. Dust swirled in eddies around the dry earth, casting the sky into a dull ochre haze. 12-year-old Wren stood motionless beside a dying campfire, the hem of her worn cotton dress whipping around her thin legs. Her fingers, raw from days of travel, gripped the frayed strap of a satchel, her only remaining possession. Ahead, her father's back grew smaller with each step. He didn't turn around. Not once. She had stopped calling out to him hours ago. The last time she cried his name, his shoulders had stiffened, but he had kept walking. No explanation. No goodbye. Just the sound of his boots crunching across the scrubland as he vanished into the heat. Wren stood there until the sun was high and the ache of abandonment gnawed through her chest like a starving animal. She was alone on the frontier, a place unforgiving even to the strong. And she was neither strong nor prepared. The land was cruel. The nearest settlement was days away. Coyotes prowled at night. The water barrel was half empty. And the bread he left behind was hard as rock. Her father had always been unpredictable. A restless man with a storm always brewing behind his eyes. But she'd never imagined this. He had told her to stay put, and be strong, muttering something about coming back. But she could hear the lie in his voice. He wasn't coming back. The first night alone was the worst. The fire she struggled to build flickered low, and the dark seemed alive. Eyes glittered beyond the circle of light. She clutched her pocketknife and whispered songs to herself, trying to push back the fear. Her belly twisted from hunger, her throat dry with thirst. She didn't sleep. On the second day, she found the trail her father had used, but after a mile, it split in 3 directions. She stared down each path, heart hammering. Which one had he taken? Or did it even matter? She turned back. The land offered no comfort, only silence. It was later that evening while digging a shallow trench to bury a dead rabbit she'd found. Too rotten to eat that she heard the horse. She froze, a distant, rhythmic pounding hooves. Wren crouched low, watching as a rider emerged through the mirage. The horse was tall, dust-covered, and carried a figure dressed in mottled leathers, a scarf pulled up over the face. Only the eyes showed dark, unreadable. The rider slowed, observing her with cautious stillness. Wren's heart thudded. She raised her knife, hands shaking. The rider dismounted without a word, tethered the horse, and stepped into the edge of the firelight. There was no greeting, no threat, just silence. Wren stood frozen, unsure whether to flee or plead, but something about the figure's calm unnerved her less than the shadows that circled her camp each night. The stranger knelt beside the fire pit and with practiced hands, began building it up again. A spark, a flame, a small but steady blaze. Wren didn't speak. Neither did the stranger. That night, they sat in silence. The stranger shared a strip of dried meat, a canteen of water. Wren ate like a ghost starved of life. In the morning, the rider was still there, sitting cross-legged and sharpening a blade. A long, curved knife. Not a weapon of cruelty, Wren thought, but of purpose. "Who are you?" she whispered. No answer. "What do you want?" Still nothing. She was about to ask again when the figure stood and pointed toward the horizon. West. Then turned and walked to the horse, holding out the reins to her. Wren stared. The silent rider had made a decision, and so did she. She stood, slung her satchel over her shoulder, and stepped toward a future as uncertain as the land itself. The warrior nodded once. They rode west, into the light of the morning sun. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain as Wren adjusted to the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her. The silent warrior rode beside her, never speaking, but guiding her with subtle gestures and patient presence. Wren's hands trembled as she held the reins. Her legs ached from the unfamiliar saddle, but she was too exhausted to complain. The frontier was vast and merciless, and every mile they covered was a struggle against the elements and against despair. Her mind was a storm of questions. Who was this silent guardian? Why had he come for her? And most importantly, could she trust him? The warrior's eyes were sharp, always alert, scanning the horizon for threats that Wren couldn't see. Sometimes, he would pause and point to a patch of edible roots, or a water source she might have missed. Though he never spoke, his actions taught her lessons she'd never learned from her father. Days passed. The warrior showed her how to read the land, the direction of the wind, the signs of an approaching storm, how to track animals and avoid dangers. Wren's fear slowly transformed into a fierce determination. The wilderness was no longer just a place of terror. It was a teacher. One evening, as they camped beneath a canopy of stars, The warrior handed her a knife, similar to his own, a slender blade, balanced perfectly for precision. Ren took it with shaking hands, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning to fight as they journeyed deeper into the frontier. Ren began to understand that the silent warrior was more than a protector, he was a guardian of her future. The days blended into one another as Ren and the silent warrior moved steadily across the unforgiving frontier. Though the landscape was harsh, it was becoming familiar. Every rock, every tree, and every whisper of the wind told a story. 1. Ren was beginning to read. Yet, despite the warrior's steadfast guidance, the silence between them remained thick, an unspoken barrier she longed to break. She tried to catch his gaze, to prompt a word, but his eyes held only quiet resolve. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, Ren finally dared to ask, "Why are you helping me?" The warrior paused, his dark eyes reflecting the dying embers of their fire. He lifted a hand, then slowly traced a deep scar running from his temple down to his jawline. Ren followed his gesture with her fingers, feeling the weight of a past she could only imagine. "I have my reasons," he finally said, voice low but steady. The sound startled her. This was the first time she'd heard his voice. He went on, "I once lost someone too, to this wild land. I vowed to protect those who can't protect themselves." Ren's throat tightened. She understood now that the warrior's silence was not coldness but a shield, a way to carry his pain without breaking. In the days that followed, Ren's respect for the silent warrior grew deeper. She learned to anticipate his moves, to understand his quiet signals. And, piece by piece, her own fears began to fade. But the frontier was not done testing her. One morning, they found signs of other travelers' tracks too fresh to ignore. The tension tightened like a coiled spring. Ren gripped her knife, ready for whatever was coming. The frontier was a place of harsh lessons, and now, she was ready to face them head-on. The fresh tracks they discovered early that morning unsettled Ren. The silent warrior's eyes narrowed as he studied them, and without a word, he signaled for her to follow quietly. For hours, they trailed the footprints through rugged hills and sparse woods. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the heat made the air shimmer like a mirage. Ren's heart pounded in her chest. Who were these travelers? Were they friend or foe? The frontier had taught her one thing. Trust was a luxury, rarely afforded. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they finally spotted a small camp hidden beneath a thicket of twisted trees. Smoke curled lazily from a fire pit, and voices carried faintly on the wind. The warrior gestured for silence and crouched low in the underbrush, motioning for Ren to do the same. She obeyed, heart racing, knife ready. Suddenly, a shout pierced the air. "Who's there? Show yourself." Ren froze as a group of rough-looking men emerged from the trees, their faces hardened by sun and hardship. One of them, a tall man with a jagged scar, stepped forward, eyes locking on their hiding spot. The warrior rose slowly, stepping into the firelight. "We mean no harm," he said calmly, voice steady despite the tension. The scarred man laughed, bitterly. "No harm. Out here, every stranger's a threat." Ren's grip tightened on her knife. She remembered the lessons the warrior had taught her: patience, observation, strength. A tense silence followed before the scarred man nodded, lowering his weapon slightly. "Fine, but you'll prove your worth first." That night, Ren faced a trial unlike any before. She was tested in ways she hadn't imagined: her courage, her resolve, her very will to survive. With the silent warrior's guidance, she confronted the harsh truth of the frontier. Survival demanded more than strength. It demanded heart. But, dawn. Ren was no longer a frightened girl left behind by her father. She was becoming a warrior herself. The morning light filtered through the branches, casting dappled patterns on the ground as Ren and the silent warrior prepared to leave the camp. The scarred men watched them with wary eyes, their earlier hostility softened into reluctant respect. Ren felt a shift within herself, something stronger, steadier. The trial had stripped away her doubts and replaced them with a fierce determination. She had faced fear, hunger, and hostility, and emerged stronger. The silent warrior finally spoke, more than a few words that day. His voice was calm but firm as he outlined the path ahead. "We'll follow the river west. There's a settlement beyond the hills where you can find safety." Ren nodded, absorbing every detail. For the first time since her father had left her, she felt a glimmer of hope. As they rode side by side, the warrior began teaching her more than survival skills. He shared stories not with words, but through gestures and quiet moments. He showed her how to listen to the land, to trust her instincts, and to find peace, even in solitude. Wren, in turn, shared her own memories, the warmth of her mother's lullabies, the harshness of her father's abandonment, the bitter taste of loneliness. Though words were few, a bond deepened between them, forged not in speech, but in shared struggle. One evening, beneath a sky thick with stars, Wren realized something profound. The silent warrior had not only saved her life, he had given her the strength to reclaim it. The frontier stretched endlessly before them, its beauty marred by lurking dangers and shadows of the past. Wren rode silently, feeling the weight of everything she had endured and everything yet to come. Her silent mentor watched her carefully, sensing the storm within. Without words, he showed her how to steady her breath, calm her thoughts, and focus her mind. These lessons were harder than any physical challenge. They were lessons in mastering fear itself. One evening, as they camped near a twisted grove, the past came crashing back. A group of horsemen appeared on the horizon, figures clad in dust and menace, led by a man whose face Wren recognized instantly, her father. Fear and anger flared inside her chest. Why had he returned? To take her back, or to finish what he had started? The silent warrior stood between them, unwavering. Wren's hand tightened on her knife, but her heart told her to listen. Her father's voice was rough and full of regret. Wren, come with me. This life, this wilderness is no place for a girl. But Wren shook her head, the lessons of the silent warrior echoing inside her. I'm not that girl anymore. I've learned to survive. I've learned to fight. Her father's eyes flickered with something like sorrow, then hardened. The frontier demanded choices, and this was hers. With the silent warrior beside her, Wren faced her past and her future. The confrontation with her father left Wren shaken but resolute. The man who had once abandoned her was now a stranger, shadow from a life she had left behind. With the silent warrior at her side, she turned her back on the past and looked ahead. The frontier was still vast and wild, but it no longer held the power to break her days, turned into weeks as they rode together. Each sunrise bringing new challenges and new victories. Wren grew stronger, her skills sharper, her spirit unbreakable. She learned to move like the wind, silent, swift, and sure. The warrior taught her not just to survive but to thrive, to claim her place in a world that had once tried to erase her. One morning, as they reached the edge of a thriving settlement, Wren paused. The air smelled of fresh pine and hope. The silent warrior dismounted and finally spoke plainly. You're ready. Wren smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude and pride. She had been abandoned, but she was no longer alone. She was a warrior, forged in silence and survival. As the sun rose, Wren stepped forward into her new life, a life she had fought to claim. With scars and strength alike. The frontier had tested her, but it had also made her whole.